lie or hide. You have to be spontaneous, and people get really sort of can feel whether or not you're sincere in live content. So that, yeah, my sneezes were definitely sincere.
Hi there, my name is Alex Asher. I'm the CEO of LearnCube, and we specialize in a virtual classroom and online school software for particularly language schools and tutoring companies. And I'm joined here with Korinne Algie, a fellow Kiwi, which I'm very excited about.
I know, me too.
And what I'm really excited about with Korinne is that she brings a whole raft of experience in the education sector itself, but she's particularly known as an international education marketing specialist. And with content marketing being really true to her kind of purpose and heart and passion, I think we're in for a real treat.
I hope so. That's my intention anyway.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. Look, we're going to start with, I guess, a slightly more sort of structured piece. We're going to go through some of the basics, help everyone feel like they're kind of caught up with what we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to go into questions and deep dive into some really interesting topics.
Absolutely. And just sort of to add to what Alex has just said, if while we're going through those slides, the slightly more structured part, if you do have a question, please just pop it in the the chat. There you go. Pop it in the chat, and Alex will hopefully see that and remind me or prompt me to answer that for you, because I do tend to talk. Okay, so shall I get right into
I think you should.
Alex?
Yeah, let's get some screen sharing going and mix it up.
Yes, where are we? Share screen. That would help if I host disabled screen sharing. Would you
how exciting.
like to please enable it?
I would love to make sure that you can do that.
Otherwise, worst case scenario, you also have the... Oh, I get to be the host. Fantastic.
Ta-da.
There we go. That should work now. Okay, we'll just go there and share that, and then I will... Whoopsies. It always brings up the wrong thing on the screen. There we go. And into this mode. Okay, so obviously we can skip through that. One of the things that I want to sort of put out there, sort of get out there on the table first, is what content marketing actually is, because a lot of people know a bit about content marketing, and that's wonderful, great, but not everybody really understands what exactly that is, or how broad the breadth of what content marketing actually is. So if we're looking at an actual definition, and the Content Marketing Institute they describe it as a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and so on and so on and so on. That's a really big, complicated definition. So, what does that actually mean? Okay, I'm going to have to move us again, Alex. There we go. I think that's probably the best spot for us up there. What does that actually mean? So content marketing is not a quick fix. Anyone who's looking to make a quick sale with content marketing is looking in completely the wrong place. It's a long-term strategy. The whole point of content marketing is to build a relationship, to tell a story. And you do that through creating high quality and really relevant content. And on top of having this high quality content, it's got to be consistent and it's got to be regular, because there's no point in having one spectacular post a month, because you're just not going to reach your audience. It's going to be buried in the feed. If you think about Instagram, you spend 2 minutes on there and already the post that was at number 1 is already way down, at number 100. It really goes quickly. So you have to be regular. And as I mentioned, it's about telling a story. It's about letting people know who you are, and really sort of putting not just a face, but a feeling, an atmosphere, a whole sort of this is me kind of approach to marketing. And when I say me, that could be your school, that could be your agency if you're an agent, just letting people know who you are, letting them fall in love with you, basically. So content marketing basically is helping your target audience to make their purchase decision to make their decision to buy into your product based on how they feel about you. So hopefully that is a little clearer than what the old Content Marketing Institute had to say.
Yeah, and tell us, what are some, I think you're probably going to go into it, but some examples of what content marketing is. So sometimes, like, all of these things make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think how do we make this a little bit even more specific and granular?
Yeah, absolutely. If I was to give you, so there is a big difference between content and content marketing. And content can be part of content marketing and vice versa. But content marketing, for example, if you're a language school, rather than just saying, this is my general English course for 12 weeks and it's going to cost you X amount of euros, it's about, so that would be sort of like advertising. What content marketing actually is showing the students' journey, showing them at your school, showing them enjoying their classes, showing them doing activities, telling the story of the student experience, and how, you are demonstrating how you are delivering this amazing experience to these students. So that is sort of, what content marketing actually is. So rather than just saying, hey, come buy this course, you're saying, look at how we care, look at how we treat our students, look at how we are, and using that as sort of a more softer sale. And that's where this long-term strategy comes in, to get students to buy into your product. I mean, we're all humans. At the end of the day, if you like someone, if you like something, then you're more likely to buy it, or at least more likely to trust them.
And I think that sort of brings to the point that I think you're going to be bringing in later, is that it's hard to like an inanimate object. It's hard to like a company.
Exactly.
So that's why even if you're selling a product or a company, that needs to feel like a person. We need to personify that.
Exactly. It needs to have a character. It needs to have, it needs to evoke a certain emotion in your audience. And that's what content marketing allows us to do. So yeah, as I said, not a quick fix, because one post showing happy students does not make a content marketing strategy. It's part of this consistent, regular idea that goes hand in hand with creating this image or personality for your school or your company or whatever.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Okay.
All right, let me flick over here. So there are 3 types of content marketing. So obviously when people hear the word content these days, they automatically think online. And that is absolutely true. And we are going to focus on sort of online, the social media side of content marketing today. But it also includes offline. And offline is things like your brochures, your news. Well, if you have paper newsletter, I know some more sort of public schools still do have paper newsletters. Whether you advertise in magazines, all this kind of thing is also part of your content marketing. And then we have hybrid. And I think that is probably the most relevant and the most used by all of us in our industry, because we aren't just dealing with students. We aren't just dealing with people who are highly online. We're also dealing with their parents. We're also dealing with associations. We're also dealing with people who do still like offline mediums. So there are those 3, but today we are going to spend our time talking about online, I think. That is sort of like the hot button topic at the moment, or the area of content marketing at the moment. Okay, so I do get asked a lot of questions and about all kinds of different things. And what I was really thinking about was, what are the 3 top things that I get asked all the time about content marketing? And I'm sorry, I've got a sniff. The sneezes are coming. Okay, so and this is something that we touched on just before, what the difference between content marketing and advertising is. And, as I mentioned before, advertising is more when you actually are trying to sell a particular product or course. It's actually, you're giving, you're saying, here is this product, please buy it. Whereas content marketing is more, the story. So there you go. Concisely put, advertising shows off a product or service. Content marketing shows off who you are.
Yeah. Is that kind of, in a way, sort of the sense of pushing and pulling? So advertising, I'm pushing something on you. I'm
Yes,
showing off, as you say. And content
absolutely.
marketing is like, hey, I'm this kind of person. Are you attracted to what I'm talking about, what I'm
Exactly.
delivering, the value that I'm offering?
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, you could sort of liken it to how we make friends in real life. I mean, if you have a bag of candy, you know, if you're a child and you have a bag of candy, you might attract people for a few minutes. But then once the candy's gone, well, you know, what else have you brought to the table? And
Got
it's
it.
that, you know, these sort of things that you know, that make you interesting, which bring people back to you.
Yeah. So one is like, do you want to buy something from me? And one is like, do you want to hang out? You're like, am I the
Exactly.
kind of person that
That
you
is
want to
a,
hang out with?
absolutely, that's a perfect way of putting it. I mean, there is a place for advertising. Don't get me wrong. I really do think there is a place for advertising, but in the long term, if you're wanting, you know, customer loyalty, if you're wanting people to really, you know, also give, you know, recommendations, write feedback, tell people about you, then content marketing is the much um, is the more powerful path to follow.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So the other question, and this is probably the most asked question, is how do I create that content marketing strategy? Now, this question, like, you know, it's not something I can answer in a minute, because there are 1,000 different ways of creating a content marketing strategy. And a lot of that really depends on what your offering is and what kind of, what your audience's particular issues are. And, you know, and the different ways that you can address that in the different mediums, like which medium is the best way to address that. So, this is, you know, in a nutshell, and I'm happy to, you know, to provide this to anyone that wants it afterwards. In a nutshell, the number one thing you have to know is what is your goal and what is the issue, or the, what is, I don't want to say problem, what is the issue that your target audience has? So how does your goal align with their issue? Because perhaps, perhaps you have a fantastic school in a small town somewhere in the UK. The issue of your student might not be that, you know, well, the issue is they want to learn English, but they might not know what is so special about this small town. So, you know, you've got London over here, and then you've got this tiny little village. You know, how are you going to compete? And this content marketing, that allows you to, you know, to really address that issue, to show them why your little town or village or whatever, why it's special and why they should choose you over London.
And it's very unique, right? Like that's the whole point, right? Like if you're a small towner trying
Exactly.
to be like, oh, we're the small town, but we're just like London, all the best things in London. It's like, are you?
Are you really? So,
Yeah.
and if that is true, content marketing gives you the opportunity to demonstrate that it actually
Yeah.
is true. And if you want to market the fact that, hey, well, we're actually nothing like London, but we're cool for all these other reasons, content marketing also gives you the ability to do that.
Great.
Okay, so then you have to think about what your desired outcome is, because as much as anyone will tell you it's about addressing the needs of students, you also can't ignore the fact that you are you know, most private schools or tutoring businesses, we're businesses. So you do have to address the fact that you also have a desired outcome. And that is usually to get more students through the door. Maybe sometimes it could be, you know, you want to change perception of your institution in the market. Maybe you had a bit of a rough patch the last few months during Corona, but you really want to let everyone know that you're back and everything's back to normal and you're doing a great job. You know, those could also be desired outcomes, but usually it is getting more students in the door. So you also have to see how the issue of the student, how that fits with your own desired outcome.
Okay.
Another thing that's really important is to think about what kind of content is appropriate, because as I said before, there's so much, you know, content can be just about anything, and there's so many ways of delivering that content, even online. Even if we were just to think about, you know, Instagram, is it a post, is it a story, is it a reel, is it a, you know, a live? all these things come into what kind of content is appropriate. So I always tell people, you really have to think about your audience and not just your key audience. Say you are a school that has summer programs for juniors. Well, actually, those junior students are not your key audience. Their parents are. So it's knowing where those parents are getting their information. Are these parents over, well, you know, if we look at sort of like the demographic stats, if they're over sort of, 40, then perhaps they are spending more time on Facebook than they are on Instagram. So it's looking at these sorts of things and judging what is appropriate. So in that kind of case, you might say, okay, my content strategy for Instagram is going to be aimed at those junior students, because if they're 15, 16, they're going to be all over Instagram. And then on Facebook, we're going to have a slightly different strategy where we're going to tailor our posts more towards their parents, the people who are paying the money, the people who are agreeing to send their students to us.
Makes sense. Korinne, on that, how do you describe the environments of these different social media platforms? Is there a way that if I'm not on those platforms, I can understand, like, Facebook is like, now I'm making things up. Is it like a picnic? Are we at a cafe? Am I in a newsstand? Like, do you have any kind of ways for people to understand?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. The way you sort of look at it is that, Facebook has changed over the years. And in the last few years, it's become more sort of family oriented, slightly older demographic. And that's simply because the people who originally bought into Facebook as teenagers are now older adults. So, it has changed a wee bit. And the Facebook has also become more business directed. Yeah. So for advertising, for giving your business a presence, Facebook is a great place, because you have a little bit more flexibility with how much content you post, how many characters, how much text. So you think of sort of Facebook is more like, and we'll do it the other way around, Instagram is like your shop front. So that's your window, that's your display case, that's what you're sort of using to really attract attention. Whereas Facebook is more that store that sits behind that window. So people can go in, there's still things on display, they can find out more information, they can talk to somebody. It's sort of a slightly different way of presenting information.
I get it.
Yeah. Okay, so again, really focus in on what your audience needs. What do they need? What do they want? How do they think? And this is also something that's really particular with if you're dealing with different countries. If your goal, for example, for the next 6 months is to increase your students from Brazil or South America in general, then you really need to step outside your thinking and think about how someone in their culture thinks and reacts to information. Yeah. And a lot of this you can find out by a quick Google. You could talk to an agent or a partner in that country that you trust and sort of get some feedback there. Yeah. But it's really important that you don't assume that everybody thinks the same way as you do, or that you understand what their actual process is, because many times it's quite different.
Yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense to me. Just thinking about, if you thought about Facebook, Instagram, social media, in terms of even LinkedIn, those people are in a very different context and a different way of thinking when they're on those platforms. So thinking in their shoes. But then the cultural differences are very present in those exact same things, because they're meant to mimic the in-person relationships. So just like you would, like, if somebody's in England, you can kind of behave a certain way, and it's all like the social kind of pressure will allow that or disallow that, and vice. But the thing is, if you're doing an English approach and you're in their Facebook in Brazil or their Facebook in Saudi Arabia, those are two very different environments to be in.
Very different environments. And I'm not saying that somebody should completely change their character to match that environment, but it is you know, that awareness. It is that perhaps choosing different language. If we use just the example of, you know, the language that you use on Instagram should be quite different to the language you use on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Mainly because LinkedIn is so much more business focused.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same sort of thing. If you are trying to attract more students from, well, actually a good example that we come across. So I do a lot of work with schools who are trying to get into the Japanese market.
Okay.
And the natural reaction of a lot of schools is to put Japanese people in their advertising for Japan. Actually, it's more attractive in the Japanese market for them to see South Americans, Europeans, African, other nationalities than it is for them to see other Japanese people in the advertising. And that's simply because they're looking for an international overseas experience. They can see other Japanese people all day long at home. So they're really looking for schools that have this sort of international flavor.
I get it.
Yeah, so that kind of fits in with that as well. So really understanding how your audience thinks is really important.
Great.
And then something that is often kind of not thought about actually is time frame. I mean, it's a bit more difficult to talk about a buying cycle when we're talking about English language courses or the decision to go abroad and study English. It varies so much. And again, you know, are they studying a short course, a long course, whatever? So it's a lot harder to talk about a buying cycle. But even then, there are key markers in the year that you can use to sort of inform or influence how you develop your content. So if you know that, okay, in summer, I offer summer courses, and in summer, all of the universities are closed, and I want these university students to come to me for a short-term English language course. Well, okay, most of the students coming to me are going to come from Nigeria, for example. Okay, Nigerian students typically need X amount of weeks to get a visa. So I'm going to start marketing to them before it's too late, before this visa processing period before it's too short, and then that makes it just impossible. So it's thinking of these kind of key steps, which also are really important to deciding what kind of content is the right content to post at a particular time.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and also, you know, content lifespan. If you're using a piece of content and it's, you know, so for example, each Thursday or each Friday, your school has a social activity for students. So every Friday you post pictures of that social experience. After a period of time, could be 3 months, could be 6 months, but after a period of time, people will stop engaging as much as they were with that content than what they were at the beginning. Because then it becomes expected. It becomes like, oh yeah, they're doing another activity. It becomes, I don't want to say boring, because maybe you do something crazy and that does pique, you know, people's attention. But it becomes stale content, for want of a better term. So you really do need to keep an eye on what you're posting, when you're posting it, and seeing when the interest in those types of posts start to taper off or drop off. And that's when you look at things and you go, okay, maybe it's time for a bit of a shake-up.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so that sort of brings me to this next question. And a lot of people say to me, well, I'm doing all of this content marketing, but I have no idea if it's actually helping. And that is a fair statement. A lot of the time, we're not sure exactly how we're doing. And the easiest way and the best way is to check on analytics. Now, I'm a huge analytics geek. I love Google Analytics. I love Instagram Insights, and I use them a lot to inform my own presence, my own content marketing. So this doesn't need to be a huge job. You don't need to spend hours each week looking at these things. I literally spend probably 10 minutes a week keeping an eye on my own Google Analytics, and Instagram and Facebook analytics probably a few minutes a day. I just keep an make on it. And then every now and then, and I'd like to say that this is structured and planned, but every now and then I sit down and go through and make a good analysis, spend a couple of hours looking at those sorts of things. But even with just that awareness, looking at it briefly every day or looking at it at the end of each week, that will already give you a better idea of what's working, what's not working, what time of day or what days of the week are working better than others. So just keeping an eye on these things, and all of these tools that I've got listed there, Google Analytics, Facebook Insights, Instagram Insights, YouTube Analytics, all free.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be using them. I mean, there are tons and tons of paid for analytics as well, and they are super useful and provide you with some amazing information. But the reality is most of us don't have the budget or the time to actually make that investment worthwhile.
Yeah.
So please go ahead and install Google Analytics. Click on your insights on Facebook and Instagram or YouTube if you have it, if you're using YouTube as well. Really valuable resources in sort of getting a feel for what or how successful or how people are reacting to your content marketing.
Can we pick some of the metrics that you feel are the most important to look for? Maybe one for each of those, just the top one.
Okay, well, that also depends on what your goal is, right?
Let's say the goal is that I'm wanting to, actually you're right. So one could just be building engagement and building.
Exactly. So building engagement, for me, building engagement is always, and I'm not a language school, so again, this is a bit different, but for me, building engagement is one of the biggest, or one of my goals that I have, to build my audience, build engagement. So what I'm looking at when I look at, for example, Instagram Insights, it's a nice, easy one to take. I'm looking at my reach, and I'm looking at engagements, because what reach is telling me is how many people have actually seen that. And then hand in hand with that, engagements, how many people have actually taken the time to do something with my post, whether it's like it, comment on it, forward it, whatever. Those things for me are really important. And I would imagine that for most language schools, if you're trying to, if your end goal is more students, then you're also trying to build an audience, and you're also trying to build your engagement. So things like reach and engagements, or reach and even likes, are really important.
Sorry. I do notice that if I was to look at my analytics, maybe this is why I need some help and some guidance, which is why I'm here. But comments and shares are much harder than, say, a like, and it makes sense from a convenience factor.
Absolutely. And the fact that, and I hate to say it, but most people are lazy. Yeah. Most people are scrolling through. Maybe they're on the bus. Maybe, their stop is in 200 meters down the street. They don't actually have time to type out a message. So what they're going to do is they're going to be like, oh, actually, I do like that. I don't have the time to comment, but I am going to like it. So you're absolutely right. Getting comments, getting people to forward. Forward is actually not as hard as getting a comment.
Comments are hard.
Comments are really hard. And even if you directly say to people, tell us X, or what is your, tell us in the comments what your, whatever is. It's still really difficult. And I think a lot of that is just the environment that, that people are in when they are looking at their social media, when they're looking at, especially for Instagram, where it is almost entirely on a cell phone. So you can be almost sure that somebody is doing something else at the same time that they're looking at your posts.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Google Analytics. Now, I find Google Analytics I could talk all day about Google Analytics, so I'm not going to. But things like, where is your audience? Which countries are responding to your, we're talking websites here. So say and a good example of content marketing on a website could be a blog. So say you've written a blog about, I don't know, activities in, near your school. Just, off the top of my head. So what you could then look at is the analytics for that blog post, and you can see, okay, now I'm assuming that you've done a little bit of SEO on that too, but looking at your analytics, you can really see which countries have responded to that data. Is it a little bit of everywhere? In which case, maybe you weren't targeting a specific country. Maybe you weren't addressing sort of specific questions that a specific market has. Or did you tailor that blog post to appeal to, students in South America? I mean, if you were, for example, if you were to do a blog post about activities in your neighborhood and your end goal was more students from Brazil, then maybe if you have activities like surfing or, the sports clubs, you look at what sort of activities Brazilian students find important and you sort of address that in a not direct, sort of roundabout kind of way. So instead of, the idea is to build this sort of feeling in the student themselves. You're not telling them what to feel. They read what you've written and they're like, oh, wow, this school really understands me. They really understand what I'm looking for. That's a great place. Eventually I want to go there, or I'm going to put it in my memory bank so that when I'm ready to go abroad, they're number one.
Yeah, it makes sense to me as well. And again, it sort of puts me into that idea of what it was like at school in a way, right? If it was somebody, shouting at the top of the lungs, look, I'm so popular, everything is so great here, you're going to be like, oh, no, not that person.
Yeah, exactly.
This drives me insane.
Exactly.
But if you're kind of looking at it like, oh, wow, that person's wearing that thing, doing that thing, surfing, oh, they're so cool. It's not because they're like, hey, I'm so cool. It's like their activities are pulling people.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you said about the whole, the pulling in. And it is about subtlety. And again, this does come into the whole long game approach, long-term strategy. And it's about really knowing your market. And maybe you want students from all over the world, but then maybe that isn't the best strategy all at once.
All at once. I think that's the critical thing. You can do these things sequentially. It doesn't mean you can't do everything, but you can't do everything at once.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean to say that, if we look at social media, that doesn't mean to say that for the next 3 months, I'm targeting only students from X. It doesn't mean that at all. You can target various students on various days or various times of the day. I mean, again, going back to, say for example, you're a German school and you want students from the East Coast of the United States. Well, posting content that's tailored towards them first thing German morning is going to get missed. They're all asleep.
Yeah.
So then you would think, okay, well, maybe in the morning I will target somebody who's in a much, the UK, similar time zone, fine. In the afternoon, I'll do a post aimed at my potential students sitting over there in the US. So you have to sort of think about these sorts of things as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And also, if you look at your Google Analytics and see that people are in a particular country, then you can actually really time your posts to when people in that country are awake. And I think that that's something that we don't do enough, that we're so focused on actually just getting posts out there and actually having some content as opposed to no content, that we don't actually think about the best ways to use that content or the most effective ways to use that content.
Makes sense to me, and I'm definitely guilty of that. So
yeah, me too, actually.
Very much resonates with me.
Yeah.
Corinne, this has been fantastic, and I think let's finish up the more structured part of our session today.
Hang on, let me just skip through it. Yeah, that was it. That was the end anyway. So let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. Hi.
This has been phenomenal. And I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it so far is just having a really step-by-step understanding of what content marketing is. I think you've really talked us through how to approach it. And again, it all comes from where are you and where are your customers? Exactly. And then finding the right path to make those as easy as possible to match. Like you don't want either yourself to go on this massive wide bend to try and get your customers and vice versa.
Exactly. I mean, if you were to look at, a lot of research that exists out there, and, if you typed into Google, how many times a day should I post on Instagram? they're going to tell you that the ideal is around 6 times a day.
Yeah.
None of us have the time, unless you have a specific social media staff member on staff, none of us have time to do 6 posts a day. So you have to keep it all in perspective. You have to look at, what's going on, what you can actually manage. If that's 1 post a day, so be it. If it's 1 post every second day, so be it.
Yep.
Having content and telling your story is so much more important than, trying to just put out content every day that doesn't make sense, or is it the quality isn't there, or, you really have to, if you say I can do quality content 3 times a week, fine.
Yeah.
Way better than doing 6 terrible posts per day.
I did want to, while we are asking our guests here some questions, and even if you're listening into this recording, you'll be able to write questions in our comment section.
Absolutely.
So definitely feel like you can engage and get more out of the time that you're investing with us, and we're enjoying having you with us. But one of the things that really resonated to me was this idea of timing.
Yes.
I actually love creating content. I love these discussions. I actually feel that the content is really helpful and valuable, but I think I do a very poor job sometimes, probably a lot of the time, in terms of my timing, because I'm so busy in the fun part of the content creation that I forget that it's actually the execution and delivery that's just as important.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why I'm no good at cooking, because my wife is a phenomenal cook, and we use the same ingredients, but we get very different results.
Right.
So if I'm too busy, I'm looking at this and I'm listening to my music here, and I'm not really kind of focusing on it, or even watching my timing in particular.
Yeah.
I've already burnt the onions. I've already kind of like left it too long or it's overcooked the pasta. I haven't taken that out in time. So all my timing's off. Exactly the same ingredients, very different result.
Exactly.
And I feel that that's probably applicable.
And yeah, it is absolutely applicable. And again, I use my own stuff a lot as examples because I know it so well.
Yeah.
And, I do on a Friday fun facts.
Okay.
Are they content marketing? Kind of, because it's giving people a break from SEO and content and serious stuff. So it's giving people a break. It's letting people know, hey, I can have a wee bit of fun too. But it's more content than it is actual content marketing. I'm not using that to try and bring in new customers. I'm basically giving people a bit of space on a Friday. And why I have that Friday fun fact is because I did notice in the beginning over time that on Fridays, any sort of meaty content that I put out there just wasn't getting traction.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how great the content was, because I could post that content on another day of the week and it would do really, really well. But I identified by looking at timing, by looking at what my audience was doing, that on Fridays, people do not want big brain meat stuff from me. They want to have a laugh. They want to relax. They want to, learn something a little quirky. And so that's what we do on a Friday. And so again, this is all sort of timing, looking at what you're doing, because just because something doesn't perform well on a Friday doesn't mean that content is terrible.
Yeah.
It could simply be that Friday was the wrong day, or maybe Friday 9 a.m. was the wrong, Monday 9 a.m. Nobody wants to know me Monday 9 a.m. because everybody is in meetings. They're checking their emails. They're, so I've identified that on Mondays, my posts, sometimes I don't post at all if I'm really busy, because I'd rather not put out something terrible. I'd rather wait for Tuesday and do something great. But I noticed that Monday mornings, no. And by the time people got around to looking at my Instagram, I was so far down their feeds that it really wasn't having the impact that I wanted. So, if I post on a Monday, it's almost always after lunch.
Makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's how I've approached even just emails these days as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have some questions, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing more coming through the chat. But can we get some, you gave some examples of, hey, this is my school. If I'm a tutoring agent, hey, this is my agency. This is what we do. I kind of get that. When I think of other content marketing, I think of other people, for example, posting about, actually teaching a language or tutoring their subject. Like, it can be also subject sort of specific. Can you give some genres of content that you've seen that's relevant to tutoring and teaching online?
Absolutely. Now, I actually can think of there's all sorts of different, I've actually got a list of all different types of content that could be quite relevant to either, tutors or even to schools. And there's a lot of things in content marketing that are not relevant, that are not appropriate for what we're doing. Sure. I mean, if you were to Google content marketing formats, you would end up with thousands of entries, but maybe just a handful of the right ones for us.
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually, there's 2 online tutors that I do follow on Instagram who do a really great job of content marketing. And they do things like, maybe a video on pronunciation, and those are just really short, 1 minute pronouncing a word, sort of lives with other online tutors. These are all the sorts of things, and I'm sure that, this kind of content is really engaging, and it's really sort of natural, and people, your audience can hear what you're trying to teach them in sort of a very spontaneous, sort of natural way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different things you can do. A day in the life. I mean, people think, why would anybody want to see that? But if you're an online tutor, if you're a tutor, or if you're a company that has a bunch of different online tutors, why not? Why not profile, what goes on in the life of an online tutor?
Yeah.
Do they sit behind a computer the entire day? Do they, go for a walk at lunchtime?
What do they do?
Yeah, what do they do? And these are the sorts of things that let students know that, hey, my teacher might be online. They're actually a real person. They're not a machine just sitting there, teaching me English. They have a life. They have life experience. And they are living the language that they are teaching me.
Yeah. I wonder if that's also exactly the reason we're attracted to certain people and not others anyway, right? So if the outcome was meant to be the same, I was meant to learn English, I was meant to learn maths, I was meant to learn any kind of subject. If that was the outcome, and I should expect that as given, then really what I'm buying is the way.
Exactly.
That I get that. And you've kind of articulated, by providing these opportunities for people to see how you teach and tutor, that's one aspect. But then also as a person, like, what am I getting when I get Korinne? Like, I'm getting a Kiwi. I'm what are some of the other things that we might have connections on?
Exactly. Or make us different. Maybe you want an online tutor, but you want somebody who speaks British English with a nice British accent.
Sure.
Maybe you don't want a Kiwi accent, or maybe that's what you're after. So these sorts of personal interactions, these live videos, or this kind of thing, just lets people sort of know just a little bit about you and get a feeling for you, because at the end of the day, we're all human, and we do rely on our gut a lot. We do, if we think, oh, that person isn't very friendly or isn't very open, then maybe we don't want them as a teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone should, I do not personally advocate for having your entire life out there on your social media. I think I mean, we need to show and give some of us, but we don't need to give all of us.
Yeah. It's probably a healthy sprinkling of both the good, bad, and ugly.
Exactly.
Not necessarily the entire swathe. We're not looking for a fire hose of your life.
No, you don't need to show your students your lunch every day. But in saying that, maybe you're a teacher and you are eating a dish that is particular from your region or your country or whatever, and then that does make an interesting post.
Yeah.
But not every day.
No, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So we've talked about some genres, day in the life of, we've talked about maybe some like special ways that you teach.
And they're
at
really,
an organizational level, how do we kind of add enough personality, even though we're a group? Like thinking like a single person, but being a group is quite a difficult thing for people to do. How do people do that?
Well, I think that actually, it's not an easy thing because you need everyone to be on the same page.
Sure.
Because, for example, and I've seen this happen, a school, they might have an idea of their brand, who they are, what sort of image they want to portray. But unless all of your staff, unless all of your teachers, all of your staff, anyone that might appear in your content marketing anywhere, blog, social media, whatever,
Sure.
If they are not on the same page with what that identity is, then you're actually going to end up giving mixed messages. So the first step in that whole process is making sure that your entire organization actually knows who you are, or actually knows what qualities, what selling points, what things you actually want, what is the message you want to give your students or potential students or their parents or whoever you've identified as your key audience. Yeah. And once you have everyone on that same page, it does get a lot easier.
Yeah.
You could do very simple things like, if you have a blog on your website, you can get different teachers who have different interests or specializations to do a sort of a guest blog post every now and then. If they have time.
I thought
there are teachers who are a bit resistant to this because they're overworked.
Yeah, but I felt this was a brilliant way, because just like in a single person, we have different parts of our personality.
Absolutely.
Thinking about that same way as a school, like you have these wonderful teachers that highlight certain parts of your ethos or your personality, and they can speak as authentically as they like in exactly the way they like. And that's just part of their personality now. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. And as long as they have that understanding of what the message that you are trying to portray or what your identity is as an organization, then they can be their individual selves, as long as that is in line with what you're actually what your overall brand image or personality of your school or agency or whatever is.
Yeah. The question I have is, why should people bother with content marketing? Because I think people have now understood what it is. They know that it's good for them, that they know that there's ways of tracking it, but I don't really think a lot of people know what is best case scenario for me with good content marketing look like.
For example, during the whole Corona lockdown here in Germany, they did the most spectacular job of actually, I should give you a little bit of background. They have students that they're like a boarding school. They have a residence. So students had already arrived in Germany. They'd already started their courses, and then ta-da, lockdown. So a lot of their students could not go home or did not want to go home, so they stayed. But what they did through their social media, for example, through their content marketing, was every day they had images of, for example, the different ways they were still engaging students, how they were taking care of like students' mental health, still giving them activities, things to do, how they were doing all of that in the middle of this crazy Corona time. So some of the pictures were hilarious because you had sort of teachers who were in, playing cards with one-on-one with a student, and they were all, in gloves and sort of almost hazmat style outfits. But it really showed how, and it was sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek, but it really showed how they were still really focused on engaging students and the students' welfare and the students' mental well-being. And through that, I thought about it, and I thought, if I was a parent sitting at home and my student was stuck in Germany at Humboldt, then I would feel absolutely
reassured, right?
Reassured, exactly. Absolutely reassured that they were doing everything in their power to make sure my child was safe, healthy, mentally fine, supported. I thought, wow, they're doing a spectacular job of communicating that through their storytelling, through their content to parents sitting at home.
Okay. So, but what was the outcome? Like, what's the end goal here? And I think we've kind of alluded to it, but we haven't really said what that is, which is also, if students in the door is something you're interested in, why do I care about content marketing? Why shouldn't I just put all my efforts into digital advertising?
Okay, so content marketing, what you're actually doing, and okay, content marketing isn't about just getting one student. And that's the sort of key here. It's you're reaching a whole, the process is a lot longer. Again, it's not like saying, oh, I have a special this week, you can study 12 weeks of English for X amount of dollars. That will bring people in the door short term. Are they going to be bought into your brand? Are they going to have that emotional connection right up front? No, that's something that you have to prove to them once they already get through your door.
Yeah.
So content marketing is giving you the opportunity to have a whole audience bought into your product, bought into you, trusting you, speaking, they may never, and this is, hopefully they do at some point end up at your institution, but they may never not end up at your institution. They may never end up at your institution, but they still might say wonderful, glowing things about you to anyone that will listen. They might still share your content because they still have that connection to you. And I think a lot of schools have found that now that they've had to move online, now that they've gone virtual, that a lot of these students who didn't have the means to actually show up on campus, all of a sudden have the means to be students of that school. And so this is sort of why this content marketing is important, because you're not just selling a course, you're selling your entire self. You're selling an experience, you're selling a feeling. And when people have this connection, one, they're more likely to study with you longer. They're more likely to extend. They're more likely to tell everybody. They're more likely to share your content. The wider impact is so much stronger than it is if you're just trying to quickly, 12 weeks for X amount of dollars.
Yeah. So it does seem, if I've got your kind of your essence there, so is it about building momentum? Like, what is it about content marketing? Like, what
absolutely.
Like, is it we've talked about being evergreen and those, there's all these words put out there, but I don't know what that means until I know what success properly means. Then that's why I'm investing in content marketing.
Exactly. So when you said snowball, that's actually a really, really good sort of analogy for what content marketing can do. So, you start off small, and the more exposure, the more quality content that you put out there, the more people buy into it. And it's sort of, it snowballs. Exactly. Snowball rolling down a hill. That's exactly what happens. And that's sort of, if you keep that in mind when you're thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I posting this short video of our students doing something on a Friday? Or it's because you're telling all those potential thousands of other students out there that, hey, we do this and it's pretty cool. And, we care enough about our students to actually have these sorts of things in place. So with your one piece of content, you're not just speaking to the students in that content or students who are already on the hook, the low-dangling fruit. You're talking to every potential person that could be a student of your school.
Yeah. I've got a metaphor. I'm missing a metaphor today. I'm running it by you, and I want you to tell me.
All right. Hit me.
To me, from what you've told me, it feels like if you're advertising, it's like snowball fights. Like I'm hitting you with a single snowball every single time, which can be really annoying if you're the wrong person. It can be really fine if you're kind of tongue-in-cheek and kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
But creating content marketing is like a snowball running down a hill. Like you're gonna get a whole bunch of people with that snowball, but you haven't had to do anything. You just had to push it down the hill and make sure it had enough momentum to build into something really large. Yeah.
That sounds pretty much that sounds pretty spot on, actually.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've got something for you to take away with you today. We've talked a lot about content. There's so much we could talk about, Korinne. I really hope that we have more opportunity to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, content marketing is such a wide field, and a lot of it really depends on, the essence of what you want, what your end goal is, and how you want to present yourself. So yeah, we've sort of scraped the surface today, but I hope that the people that have joined us have taken away one or two small bites that they can use.
No, this has been brilliant. Thank you again, Korinne. If you're wanting to learn more about Korinne and what you do, tell us a little bit again where they'll find you.
Okay, so the easiest way to find me is probably on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, I'm all over the place. You just pop in my name, you'll find me. Also, I have a website, which is also KorinneAlgie.com. Unfortunately, I was blessed with a name that isn't so easy to spell. So if you have trouble finding it, you can reach out to Alex. He'll put you in touch.
And I will not mispronounce it next time as well.
Yeah, that's okay. I live in Germany. I'm used to it. I'm Korinne Algie, but in Germany, I'm Korinne Algie. So,
There we are.
yeah, I'll answer to most things as long as it's said nicely.
And if you're looking to also see what other content we're going to be bringing out in the future, please look at our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Please subscribe to our YouTube channel because we have a whole lot of content happening every single week. It's all about helping language schools and tutoring companies build out their skill sets. And we do that through our LearnCube University, which is a free resource. And we're hoping to make this as rich and helpful as possible.
And yeah, if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, then please go ahead and do that. Remy, please. It's a really great resource. And I think there's actually a lot there that would help you. And I'm sure help anybody else who's on this or watching it at a later date. I have watched a bunch of the videos, so I can personally say that they are quality videos.
Thanks again. And thanks again for all those that tuned in today. See you later.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Bye.
Bye.